And now we return to Atlantis, which had grown very prosperous and great. For Atlas was a proud ruler, and established himself a great name. He was stronger than his father, and exalted himself as a deity of worship. He cultivated his body and attained immortality, and so began to act in the ways of the old rulers. He destroyed many altars of worship, and wished all glory upon himself. Atlas was incredibly proud, for he was a lover of pleasure as well as of all beauty, and he created many magnanimous things to exalt himself as a god, including the written language, and many knew of his creations, for they were above even Adam. It was also at this time that an ancestor of Methuselah, named Noah, was conceived, and he was righteous in virtue, compared to all others of his time. He was like his forefathers, and lived a simple life, and so was more esteemed, for he did not partake in the pride that those of Atlantis were disposed of. He married a woman who was a Nephilim, and conceived 3 sons, who were named Ham, Japheth, and Shem. They were all distinct in conduct, and applied themselves in virtue towards qualities of their strength. For Ham was a warrior and hunter, physically stronger than most. He learned the arts of athletics, might, and power. He valued that which was of the body. Japheth was an intellectual in his regard, for he did not boast himself on physical prowess, and valued study of logic, mathematics, and astronomy. He was a great scholar, and many marveled at his inventions, particularly towards medicine and philosophy, which was valuable to those who listened. Then Shem was a musician who played the flute, as well as a scribe, and one who could predict events like his father. He would tell stories that marveled many, and his melodies were captivating towards the women of which he loved greatly. Although exalted in his creative nature, was he troubled in spirit, and found himself questioning amongst himself as to the makings of this world. While Japheth was philosophical in reason and practicality, it was Shem who truly sought to grasp the understandings of spirit and of God. For he wrestled in many battles of his own mind, and while possessed great wisdom, suffered the most out of all 3. So it was that Noah raised his sons of virtue and to hold righteously towards humility and prudence. For it was upon one day that Noah received a vision from God that the entirety of this great empire, led by Atlas, would be utterly destroyed, and the entirety of the land would be covered in a great flood. So he was told to construct a great ark, and to hold within 2 of every animal of the land, and save only his children and their wives. So Noah was shocked at these visions, and proclaimed to warn everyone he knew, for he was considered a learned and respected man in his kingdom. Yet once he proclaimed these prophecies, he was disregarded and humiliated, for they did not account for God, and so worshipped Atlas as the most exalted, as he was the greatest and most powerful, and the God of Noah was unseen and considered a mental delusion of the sort, to which could not be trusted. Yet several still questioned his prophecy, and word got to Atlas, the greatest of all, who laughed at such remarks. For how could a common man foretell such a prediction before I could know of it? The stars do not foresee such an event in the slightest. The man speaks lunacy. No one should pay mind to his word. For such a declaration did no one regard Noah or his prophecy. The entirety of the land rejected him, and so continued their ways. The empire over the years grew increasingly decayed, with many uprisings in various cities and much degradation as to the beings who lived within it. Many attempted to undertake customs of the old metropolis, and so the justice and golden age of Atlantis began to fall apart. Even to his humiliation, Noah continued constructing his ark, and his children held him in esteem, regardless of the sights of others. Yet Shem was greatly in pain, for he grew to love a woman named Maya, who was of utmost beauty and wisdom. They came to know each other very young, and Shem was always in love. And while Maya also felt deeply for Shem, did she live a more reasonable life and sought only partnership in preserving divine offspring, and did not wish to be tethered by love. It was also Atlas who adored her when he was granted sight upon her. It was one evening when Maya and Shem sat together amongst the grassy hills and were in love. They were young, having reached adolescence, and so began to discuss marriage. Maya, how much do I love you, I cannot hope to describe in words. Let us get married and have a family already, for we are at the proper age now. You are right, Shem, and yes, do I love you, yet it is prudent for me to think of my own offspring, for that is what I know to be of utmost importance. I wish to preserve that which is godly of our nature, for Atlas has grown to adore me, and so has the greatest seed. But you do not love him. How can you hope to have great offspring with someone you do not love? For we love each other, and we can have that offspring which is also great. Yet look around you, Shem, and see how corrupted our kind has become. More people are born with illness and die younger every generation. We cannot let our kind become degraded any longer, and it is important we preserve that which is exalted, for sake of our glory, lest we fall to depravity. Yet is our glory to be of something adhered to? For we know of the history of this empire, and have seen that our nature has been exalted by unnatural forces. To preserve our glory is to preserve that which goes against God. You speak of this God again, of which I do not understand. For things happen as they happen, and so we were granted the privilege of being exalted, and so must learn to control it for our benefit. Yes, they have been depraved in their wicked actions, yet I have faith in myself that I can raise a child of godliness much like the mother of Gilgamesh, who was most esteemed in conduct. To marry Atlas is to be granted the seed of which will bring forth our highest being. I beg you to reconsider. Gilgamesh's strength came not from his godliness, but by the nature to which was of man. Maybe so, but I cannot rely off this logic which was pure chance. Many are of half-breeds and are degraded both in conduct and physicality. The ones born of godly nature in this age are exalted in themselves, despite a few who are depraved, and so your rationale only serves towards a vast minority, which I cannot rely upon. They left each other at that point still in love, yet did they grow embittered as to the prospects of fate. It was that evening when Shem was granted a vision from God that he should one day marry Maya and produce a nation that was divine and no longer be subject to the degradation of Atlantis, and they should reign forever as the pinnacle of mankind. Was his vision so great did he grow emotionally in fervor and sought out Maya once more the next day. Yet did Atlas propose to her prior, and so she waited to make her decision, for she wanted to do what was right. Maya, I must tell you this vision I was granted, that was from God the Most High, for we are destined to be wed and produce an offspring unfettered by the degradation of our age. It seems fitting for you to make such a ruse upon our discussion last night. Why do you attempt to trick me in the name of love, as if you do not respect my reasoning? You claim my prophecy to be lies? What an insult. Do you not believe my vision? I have made predictions before, and they have all come true. That may be so, but in those moments where you not so emotionally conveyed, the distortions you exhibit show that it is all a trick you have devised as a means to win over my love. Atlas has declared his wish to marry me, and so I heavily consider it. You wish to marry that oaf? It is clear you do not even love him. Why do you act obtusely against what is naturally right? The flood will come and wash up everything he has created. It is only through me that you will be saved from the impending doom of this empire. Your belief in this God has grown foolish. You scream like a child who does not get what they want. This supposed prophecy of the flood was foretold nearly a decade prior, yet has not come to pass. The decision I make is for my own. You do not need me to satisfy your love, for many women are in love with your melodies, and so what use do you have for me? For you can create many nations with them, and I make my choice to preserve that which is godly. Stop being as a child and learn to see the importance of what I must do, for I must follow what is rational, as that is the truth that is always unfolded. At this Shem grew enraged and struck Maya, for he was young. She immediately withdrew herself, and so hated Shem because of this. Yet did he grow remorseful and begged for forgiveness, which she did not grant him. She then married Atlas, and as a dedication for his love, built the highest tower in all the land. Many marveled at the tremendous feat, and so Atlas was exalted even further. It was several years later that Noah finished his ark and prudently gave order to his children to make preparations, for the flood would come at any moment. It was then that Shem grew bitter in years, for he could not hope to rectify his false prophecy, which had never happened before. He constantly attempted to rectify his transgression, and he wrote many melodies for in the hope to win over her love, but Maya never forgave him. She was soon conceived with the seed of Atlas, and Shem was devastated. Yet, out of his love, Shem built for her an ark in the south of the land, on a hilltop to be safeguarded against the incoming waters. He gave word to her that when the flood would come, she would be granted safety at the very least and hopefully survive. She considered it, and while she still resented Shem and did not believe in his prophecy of the flood, admired his dedication to her. Atlas often laughed at the prospect of Noah, and so in his confidence in the empire, sought to destroy all vessels and ships purely out of mockery against this prophecy. Yet Noah was unwavering and made all preparations accordingly, and situated his ark towards the east. Then it was, on an ordinary day, that the earth shook violently, and the waters began to arrive. Yet did they arrive slowly at first, for they came from very far away. Maya understood instantly the truth of this prophecy, and could not shake her fear. It was then she made decision to resort to the raft Shem had made her, for she had time to make travel there, and hoped to preserve her offspring. She pleaded on Atlas to go with her, but he refused, in his own pride, that he should lift up the very waters themselves against the will of God, and protect his empire, and most importantly, the tower to which he dedicated to her. She remained in her preservations, and so Maya journeyed alone towards the south of the land and the hilltops where her ark rested, while Atlas ventured out to the incoming waves. At his command, and when all the others had ran far away, he faced towards this gargantuan tidal wave, and so lifted the ceilings of the waters as it rained down upon him by the force of his godlike spirit. And so was his decree. O you, one who claims to be God of Almighty, see what is impervious to my will, and what will never break that which is within my heart. For I am all-powerful in this land, and so no matter what exists, regardless of if you have created it, will ever seek to destroy me, nor the creations I have put upon this world. For my tower is a testament to my absolute soul, and so I preserve my pride, and lift up these waters which you have condemned my civilization to go under. Yet you will have no power over me, and so I will never yield to your decree, to bring this world of my creation to demise, and so all will see of my magnitude and might, for this city will never die. So this was the fall of Atlas, and he was pressed into the underworld by the waters he lifted up, and so all his city, including his tower, was submerged under his own weight of power. He was condemned to lift the ceilings of waters for all eternity as a sake to keep his pride and to preserve his kingdom. He now lives underneath the firmament of the oceans, holding up the entirety of the land on his back. And so the entirety of the nation of Nephilim were destroyed and never seen again, as well as all of their cities within the sprawling empire. For all who remained were Noah, along with his sons and wives, who ventured east, as well as Maya, pregnant with the son of Atlas, who ventured west. And so forewent the last genealogy of the Nephilim. It was after the floods to which Noah traversed the entirety of the Sahara on his ark, and as the waters were so great, flooded the entirety of the lands within those regions of northern Africa up through the Red Sea. And so they journeyed north at the edge of the plain towards the southern border of what is now known as the nation of Israel, and made settlement there. For even today one can look up from the highest vantage point and see the remains of the destruction of this great flood to which extends in length of the vast journey Noah made on his ark. The generations that proceeded after them brought forth many nations, of which will be described. For at the onset of their celebration upon greeting dry land, Noah fell into a drunken stupor from his wine and was seen prancing naked behind his tent. Ham, who had developed his own distaste towards the ilk of his father, came upon to witness him and mocked him in his current state. What can we remark of such an embarrassment of man, to fall in such a spectacle of himself? For how could God choose such a man, so weak in countenance and strength, to be of divine messenger for this age? For you are truly depraved and of a repugnant sight. Upon hearing this nearby, Shem and Japheth came to protect their father and clothed him. Yet Ham was even more displeased upon this sight. You both are wretches, defending such an oaf of a man. For the truth of our divinity is in our power, and that is truly what matters in this new world we find ourselves in. Upon awakening from his drunkenness, Noah arose up and found his words and mind of clarity once more. You, son of mine, are the one who is of a foul disposition, for you should know that your strength and power mean nothing in the eyes of God. It is those qualities which led to the destruction of the land in the first place, for Atlantis was an empire of absolute power, and so where does it lie now? And yes, you may call me an oaf and a drunken mess, yet here I am, the last one standing. So you may have your strength, for it will only be a curse unto you, and your nation will have no place of power in the world to come." At this he closed his eyes and fell asleep. Ham merely laughed to himself and departed from this encampment to create his own settlement. And so foretells the genealogy of Ham as he went south and brought his family with him, including his wife. He raised his children to be warriors, and so were known in this land as being extremely powerful, for their physical strength and spiritual power surpassed all the other men who lived in these lands. Ham begot a son who was named Menes, and he did many great things in his time. He built a great city on the edge of the Nile River and reigned there for 200 years, to which he was all-powerful in the land. Yet after his many years did he grow tired of this kingdom, and so sought to continue his glory in other lands. He then traveled to what is now known as Crete, and founded a civilization there to which he was worshipped as a divine being. His physical might was cherished as a singular aim of divinity. It was many years until a woman named Hera, who is of the seed of Shem, found refuge there. She seduced Menes with an enchanting dance while she held 2 snakes in her hands. He worshipped her in absolute love and conviction, to which she upheld against him. And so this was the dynamic of their relationship, as she was far more powerful over his soul. Together they produced offspring who called themselves the Minoans, and built themselves a great civilization off the virtues of their physical might and of philosophical insight. It came to pass that the offspring were so numerous and strong, and so embittered by the authority to which Menes and Hera accustomed themselves to, that they sought revolution. For she gave birth to a son named Heracleon, and he was more powerful than his father. He grew in age to be in discontent to the tyranny of Menes and Hera, and so brought forth an army together. They eventually murdered and consumed the flesh and blood of Hera as to garner her divine power. Menes, upon hearing of this, fled the Minoans and escaped north towards the Balkans. From there his offspring were later known as the Slavs, who were of great physical might. It came to pass upon Menes' son, known as Horus, a great hunter, who held together this great kingdom on the Nile and kept it united and powerful. Horus was known to have traveled and united all the lands into one kingdom. There were several nations, however, who resisted, yet he was all-powerful along with his bloodline. He arrived upon an encampment of nomadic huntsmen in his expansionary travels, who were known as Nubians at this time. He was unnecessarily cruel in his ways, and mindlessly pillaged and destroyed all other settlements in his path. He came upon the Nubians and destroyed all their men and took all of their possessions. The ones he let live he humiliated while defiling their wives in their sight. He took their idols of worship and defecated on them, as well as emitting his seed on them as a means for defilement, for he believed he was superior in every way. There was one final elderly sage of whom he greeted, who was very small of stature compared to the great magnitude of Horus. For Horus was great, and his skin of golden hue, generally hairless excepting for thick, powerful locks of deep black hair on his scalp, compared to the Nubians whose flesh was crackled, darkened, and chafed, and covered in hair of which was matted and brown. It was in amusement that Horus lifted the sage with one arm, for he possessed great strength, and sought to humiliate him before all the others. Upon tossing him to the ground, the elderly sage, who was not at all bothered by the ilks of this ancestor of Ham, began to prophesy. "O you great powerful king, skin like the finest of gold, hair like black leaves of the greatest of trees, how you should find one day that your strength and power will no longer give you glory. For in your power you will find your body crushed into the earth, and so like the earth your skin will turn into its dark shade. For no longer your skin will glow like the sun, and so you will be as if underneath it. Your hair will be crushed, and turned into roots of all forms of which you see. It is your strength you boast of that will be your demise, and find it will lead to your enslavement. It will come to pass in your enslavement that your masters will continue to always be weaker, yet you will find no way to overtake them. Your gods will not save you, your spells will not protect you. You will be alone, you will be stuck in this earth, and all of your seed as well." From hearing this, Horus was greatly enraged, and so ripped out the sage's heart from his chest, and consumed it before the sight of all the others. Let you all be witness today that I am all-powerful, and none shall Horus bow down to, for my nation will be of absolute might, and all other nations will tremble at my glory. My ancestors will reign supreme, and enslave those of this pathetic kind. for in no way does might ever lose, and will always rule over the weak. Let all know that this nation under Horus will reign for eternity, and our spirit will be immortal." At this his army cheered in pride, and so they enslaved every other Nubian who lived there. For this kingdom, named Egypt, then grew in magnitude of which was most powerful in the land, so Horus decreed, until it was no longer. And this was the lineage of Ham. So he continued to Japheth, who, as said, was a man of great learning and intellect. Noah and his sons traveled through Mesopotamia down to the Persian Gulf, to which there they parted ways. For Noah was old and soon passed away in this region, after having given his sons the 7 Noahide laws. Shem and Japheth mourned for 2 months after Noah's burial, and shared many difficulties. They stumbled upon villagers and were marveled at, for they had godlike qualities. It was there that Shem began to tell stories of Atlantis and the Nephilim, to which he drew in the ground for them to understand in pictures. Yet, upon the marvel of God that Shem attempted to explain, did Japheth grow irritated, for although he was highly intelligent, could not understand the concept of God, for it was not reasonable to him. "This almighty creator you boast of, how can you prove that it exists? For how can a God with no shape or no form possibly exist in the first place? What use does a formless God grant me? I can build a statue of a God to my own creation, or a God of that which had existed to the likes of Adam or the great Gilgamesh, a God which pertains to that which is real in the world of events. The God of fertility, strength, war, peace. The possibilities are endless. In my craftsmanship I can create form in a finite state, beyond that which is death. Their spirit lives on in memory, and their glory is sanctified. A statue made of solid gold, to which never rusts. This truly is worthy of worship, if we conduct ourselves to it, and so let it be our center for that which is good. For how does a formless God ever hope to compete with a God made of gold? O brother, how do you not see what is so obvious with your vast intellect and understandings of this world? How can you not see greatness where it is present in every moment you breathe, and every moment you think? For our God is ever present amongst all things. God is greater than any statue or monument. God is our very essence of being itself. For God made all of us in light of their eternal greatness. You say this as if this God is somehow my own self, so I should worship my own self according to your ways. Yet isn't this the same downfall of that great empire? For they marveled at their own power, this power to thwart this God of yours and our fathers, that power to which caused injustice to all the other people. It is our attachment to the self that brings suffering upon our species. For the truth is that we are one species, striving towards our highest sense of potential. You see the wrong self, brother, for it is not the self you choose for yourself, but the self that always was. Myself and yourself are of the same self, and so we are no different than the trees or the stars at night. For what is the highest sense of potential you speak of? Where is its ceiling? Does a tree ever stop growing to achieve its highest self? A tree is always in a state of becoming itself. While it grows, it is not ever in a process of becoming more or less of a tree, and the same accounts for our species. You speak in a riddle of contradiction. Who I am is who I am now. The process of constantly becoming ourselves means to be inferior to something else, yet you say we are already complete, in the sense that who we are is always what we will be, which you say is God. How is this God any distinction of the self I choose to be? Should we not pray to that which is greater than who we already are? To become this exalted self you speak of? Many worship the sun as being the greatest, to which is what we can rationally understand as the truth from our own sight as being the most exalted form. There is only one God in this case that is the master of us all, and that is the sun. To at once be with the self is to worship the highest potential state of being. There are far greater things than the sun, brother. I do not see these things. Point them out to me so I may understand you better. I cannot point to you in any direction save for the direction of what is already inside you. Yet you are already so full, Japheth, for your mind is filled with an intellect that blinds you to what is just underneath the surface. I do not boast to your greatness of the mind, for I am nothing more than a fool with a broken heart. Even my prophecy only lends itself to a half-truth I must still find a way to fulfill. Yet God does not have a need to explain how things unfold. For what little intellect I have, I cannot possibly hope to understand how God performs his ways. Our Father spoke to our God, and so it was inside of him, inside of us, this entire time. You say there is profound wisdom here, where prediction can be made. somewhere beyond what is of the mind, but the mind is all there is it not? I do not hear God when my mind was consumed in thought, for I do not bear a burden of constant mindful chatter. I am simple and enjoy the silence of a calm life. It is there in this silence does God speak, brother. It is in the emptiness of our mind that God finds us so we may be enlightened. You say if I empty my mind, I would be enlightened in this manner, that if I empty myself of all intellect, I will become enlightened. I do not understand how this works, for only through intellect can the intellect be strengthened. You cannot do the opposite of one thing and expect that same thing to occur. To empty the mind is to go contrary to enlightenment. We must develop the mind to its fullest capacity, and there we achieve a fuller understanding of this world. Yet who are you, Japheth? You could not predict the flood waters, not as our father had. For my predictions have also come true, something to which your mind on its own could not. You make predictions based on your reason, yet they still often fail you. If you truly wish to listen to God, you must learn to empty yourself of that which is already filled. Embrace that which is emptiness. I still do not see your views, brother, but I will take this counsel to heart regardless. You should know that soon I must depart from here, and am compelled to travel eastwards towards the furthest reaches of this land, so I may learn of this world further. Yet I will bring this practice of yours to mind in my travels, so I may uncover this sort of revelation. But how does one empty their mind? When you look to the sky, do you see it as being full or as being empty? This is how your mind should be. At this, Japheth silently reflected on his brother's statement. It was at dawn the next day where they parted ways, and Shem proceeded to say his farewell. It will take many years for you to find God, brother. You say this as if you already know, for you know already that I do. Then when shall I find God? When you reach the ends of this land, you will be granted much wisdom of all things, yet you will not find God. For until that day you are ready, I will return to you with one small piece of knowledge that will grant you ultimate enlightenment. For all these years I held myself as superior to your intellect. I may be hard to convince otherwise. At this the two brothers laughed, and so parted ways, until many thousands of years passed, to which there would arise a teacher from the west, who would return to Japheth. And now we continue on the lineage of Japheth, for he married a woman who was of the same ilk, who was named Moksha, and they traveled eastwards together, living in the Caucasus region. They brought with them much wisdom from Atlantis to the others who resided there. It was here that Japheth grew accustomed to meditation and of embracing silence, and began to learn many things of this nature. It was at this time that Moksha and Japheth experienced dissatisfaction with each other, for Japheth was mainly concerned with his own meditations and neglected to provide any love towards Moksha, and so she was unloved and grew bitter and hateful towards her husband. So after several years, they divorced from each other, and Moksha, pregnant with Japheth's child, left him to his travels and proceeded to the north and established customs of her own there, to which she was worshipped in some regards for her wisdom and superior nature. Her son from Japheth, who was named Odin, grew to become a patriarchal figure in the north, for Moksha raised Odin in the manner of her wisdom, and so he was given an insatiable hunger for higher learning, and so sought himself to reach the highest point in all the land, that he may find the center of all things. Through his travels he produced many offspring and nations. It was when he parted ways with his mother did Moksha grow even more remorseful and bitter, for she could not bear to part from her only son. Yet she still partook in her absolution of worship, and was cruel in many ways towards those who worshipped her, and gave no mercy to those who suffered by her sorcery. For although she possessed great intelligence, she was incredibly unforgiving, and particular towards men, for she held contempt even unto her death, as she lived many years. She was known to have seduced the great Menes, who died while laying with her, to which he brought forth a son named Veles, who spawned the nation of Slavs, and much later the Mongols. She was absolutely attached and devoted to her son, so he committed to his life under her eyes. Then as for Japheth, he left and continued eastwards, entirely on his lonesome, and traveled for many years and mastered the ways of immortality. Yet as he was a hermit, he seldom communicated with any person, and merely wandered towards the ends of the land. Throughout these many years, he grew to forget his own name, and was so cultivated in his arts that he became ageless. So he finally reached the ends of the land towards the great ocean. Upon his journey of many centuries, did he achieve profound things relating to his spirit and the nature of the other world. Yet even from his magnanimous enlightenments did he still not find God. He learned to forsake his own name and identity. It was on a mountaintop he felt compelled to reside in, and he lived there many years until he was discovered by primitive tribes. In what ways they could have communicated, they questioned him. "Great One, bigger than trees, we have seen you for many days, and you are so wondrous to behold. Clearly you are a god of some sort. What is your name?" To this Japheth responded, "My name? What is a name? For right here and now I am this mountain." And they were amazed. He decided to greet himself upon several tribes in this area, and was granted authority over them due to his sublime continence, wisdom, and grandeur. He was worshipped as a god. They called him the Yellow Emperor because of his golden skin. He taught them many great things from his insights of meditation over the centuries, and made it his own virtue to procreate with the women of this land as a means to preserve his teachings and bring forth a nation spawned directly from him. After this, he grew tired of his livelihood and forsook his life at an old age, and so died peacefully after reigning many years. This nation eventually propagated into what is currently known as China, of whom extended his many teachings throughout the generations. Yet were they plagued by his characteristic of hermeticism, and so found themselves in states of isolation, especially amongst the most spiritually exalted. From this, they sought to extensively preserve the sanctity of marriage in later generations, to counter that which Japheth ignored. And so now we come unto the lineage of Shem, who did not travel far initially, but merely towards the east in Mesopotamia. He had nations that arose from him spread all the way through India, Anatolia, Arabia, Persia, the Mediterranean, and as far south to where one of his daughters married a son of the lineage of Hams, who was named Cush. They begot a son, Nimrod, who is known to have done great things in this region and fostered the Cushite nation at this time. Nimrod was known to have been an excellent hunter, and in his later years expanded his territory towards the city of Ur, and he heard of the great stories of Gilgamesh there, and so named his son after him. Shem raised up his family in a manner that was cordial to his nature, of being kind and devoted, ensuring the family unit was preserved. Yet he continued to be unsatisfied, for even unto his death he still was devoted to Maya. He outlived his wives and wandered the wilderness for many years, fostering many nations. He told the stories of Atlantis to every village he encountered, and while they failed to understand his spiritual teachings, did they uphold the stories and continue the chain of narrative this way. For he taught them calligraphy, and from this did they harbor much progress in their civilizations. Yet they did not cleave unto God, for they could not understand this concept until there would come to pass an ancestor of Shem in this region named Abraham. It was many years when Shem saw the multitude of nations that sprang forth from him, and yet did he go unnoticed, and remained hidden, for he rejected any form of worship that may be granted. And so his children worshipped other deities of their own creation, and partook in many transgressions. Yet he bore no responsibility, and only sought to fulfill the will of God. It was to his virtue that his stories survived, and so from this he was satisfied. He knew towards the end of his life that in his multitude of nations that there would come a child from his seed that would fulfill the true prophecy from God, and at this he found peace. Upon venturing northeast, did Shem meet a righteous woman, a daughter of Odin's, who was beautiful in her countenance. It was in his old age that he grew devoted to her and fell in love. They gave birth to a child, to which they called Vishnu, who was born with the skin of a god, and he did many amazing things. Vishnu did abide by the teachings of Shem, and understood the wisdom he uncovered to him, and at this Shem was granted a son to which surpassed him in spirit, and so he was content. They lived the rest of their lives together this way, and Shem did not die with a broken heart, for God did not forget him. Maya survived in her raft upon sheer miracle, for upon wandering the waters many days, had become extremely malnourished and on the verge of death. She arrived on a shore in the southwest near what is now known as Brazil, and was greeted by tribes of a primitive sort. Due to her malnutrition, her son was born of weak frame and short stature, and consisted of a nature that was perpetually hungry. As Noah brought the animals from the land, did Maya bring 18 seeds of the finest vegetables and legumes from Atlantis. She named her son Bakab, and the tribal people worshipped this child as a god. Maya taught to her ability the ways of Atlantis, and they built farms in a great city. While she was virtuous in conduct, her son was not, and so partook upon himself the wicked natures of the Nephilim, and devolved in the consumption of humans to cultivate power. Maya, witnessing his increasingly destitute ways, made a pragmatic choice and warily exiled him from her great kingdom, where he was condemned to live in the wilderness. He took control of many tribes to his following. Maya understood the truth as to which Shem had foretold her, and she grieved exceedingly. In her years ruling this kingdom, did she go to the shores of the ocean in a state of despair, knowing in her heart that Shem would return one day. Yet did she fear for what wrath he may bring, as she did not know what state his heart would be in when this would come to pass, and at this she could only mourn. It was many years where Bakab amassed power in the north of his growing empire, and sought to take revenge on his mother. It was then that he pillaged and destroyed the kingdom that she built. To consecrate her power, he consumed of her flesh and blood. It was through this ritual did he change his name to Itzamna and considered himself as equal to God, as he became one with the anointed mother. Maya's city remained in destitution, and Itzamna expanded his empire to the north and continued the traditions of the Nephilim in pursuit of power. Bakab brought forth many sons and daughters, and he was usurped and murdered by his offspring who lusted for power. And so his empire disbanded, and many kingdoms were formed, some as Bakab and some as Maya. And so this was the lineage to which Maya led forth through her son, Bakab. Although the seed of Itzamna held sway, it was the will of God for Maya to return and complete the prophecy when the time for man was right and be given the seed of Shem. Yet did they hold the pain in their hearts that echoed in the generations. It was to be until one day they would find reconciliation with each other and no longer be tormented, for then truly there would be offspring of them both, and they would find love in each other's hearts, and so bring forth the nation of God.